How's it going, guys? Shape here, and welcome to the channel. This video is going to cover what I think are going to be the best professions to make gold with at the start of Shadowlands. This is my personal opinion, and I'm going to base my decision on the data we have from previous expansion and what professions made the most gold then. Also, towards the end I will go over some tips as well as things to avoid based off previous expansions. I'm going to go through each profession as it has historically ranked at the beginning of expansions and then wrap up what I think to be the best professions to have at the beginning of Shadowlands. I'm going to be excluding any gathering professions as they are usually harder to gauge on how much gold you are making from them at the beginning of an expansion. That is not to say you aren't going to want to combine a gathering profession and a crafting profession together, because this will be important once you decide on which profession you're going to go with and what to combine it with. So with that said, let's hop into it and find out what those methods are. Be sure to turn on your notifications, make sure you have that bell rung, and drop a like so you don't miss any of my future content. If you have any questions, drop a comment or tweet at me. Also, be sure to drop a comment on what you usually do to make gold at the beginning of an expansion. First off, let's go over some historic data from BFA. Based off a ton of guides, posts, and videos, the list I've come up with for the best expansions to make gold off at the launch of BFA from least profitable to most were Alchemy, Jewel Crafting, Tailoring, Blacksmithing, Leatherworking, Engineering, Enchanting, and finally Inscription. From what I can remember and off of the information I gathered, the reason Alchemy was so low is because no one was buying any of the potions or flasks until the raid launched. You will definitely want this profession once the raid unlocks, and really the rest of the expansion, as it historically has been a really good way of making gold. With the changes coming in Shadowlands and the reintroduction of the oils you can apply to your weapons, I think this is going to be a must-have for all high-end raiders as well as anyone wanting to really increase their stats and abilities. With the oils being able to stack with the potions and provide an additional 10% increase of the ability, that is going to most likely be a huge source of gold income for your alchemist. Not to mention you will still have flasks to profit off as well. Let's talk about jewel crafting next and how it usually stacks up in terms of profitability. Historically, you can make a good amount of gold off of jewel crafting at the beginning of the expansion, but it quickly fizzles out after the first couple weeks. This is because the gems have been pretty easy to obtain and the crafting items didn't really have many materials you needed to make them. This made it very easy for almost anyone to just go and level jewel crafting and get what they needed. Once the items start not selling, everyone starts undercutting to dump whatever they can to just get rid of it. With the changes coming in Shadowlands of other crafters using gems to change what stat is on a piece of gear, I think this can definitely bring a higher value to jewel crafters. Not only will you need gems for your sockets, but other crafters will want specific gems as reagents to craft gear that the most players will want. Considering all that, jewel crafting might have a higher profitability than it has in the past for a longer period of time with all the Shadowlands changes. Next up, let's talk about the crafting professions. Tailoring, blacksmithing, and leatherworking have always been in the middle of the pack in terms of profitability, and I anticipate them not changing very much for Shadowlands. While everyone is gearing up, this will be the most profitable time for these professions. The plus in Shadowlands is all of these professions will have the ability to craft legendary items. However, once everyone has all of the gear they need from the crafting professions, you will start to see the prices start to dip. I have always said that these crafting professions needed something else because the main source of gold making comes from the gear side of things. Well, Shadowlands is going to take a stab at that, as it is bringing back some throwback type of extra things these crafters can do. Blacksmiths are going to be able to create sharpening stones, which increase the stats of your weapons for a certain amount of time. For players wanting to min-max, I think that these are going to be a must-have for them and should be a steady source of gold because of that. Leatherworking is bringing back some old attributes as well with the armor kits. These are going to be able to be applied to your items and increase your stamina for a certain amount of time. Much like the sharpening stones, the armor kits are going to be used primarily by tanks instead. Tailoring is the only one of the crafting professions currently not getting some sort of added benefit like the ones we just talked about with the armor kits and the sharpening stones. While you can still craft all of the gear and legendaries, this one feels as it might be missing something to keep it relevant for very long. However, with the crafted gear and bags, you might be able to make a decent amount of gold right out of the gate, since others might not be focusing on this profession. Next up, let's talk about engineering. Engineers again have a fun set of items and abilities they will be able to do, which is similar to past expansions. Typically, engineering is probably the worst overall profession in terms of making gold. There are a few mounts and other such things you can do to make gold, but most of the gold making has been chipped away from the engineers over the years. Shadowlands is trying to give engineers something back as it has added the belt enchants back to the game. Every time a player gets a new belt, they are going to need that enchant. This will make these belts a steady source of gold because of that. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about enchanting. Enchanting is almost always one of the best ways to make gold throughout the whole expansion, and I have to say that it is definitely not going to be changing in Shadowlands with the changes they have announced so far. Not only is enchanting going to give you everything you already had, but now they have made it even better as we head into the Shadowlands. This is because armor chants are finally back. When Blizzard decided to go away with these a long time ago, it felt like something was always missing when you received a new piece of gear. This combined with all the other enchants that were already available is going to make enchanting a must in terms of gold making. However, we left out one of the best and my personal favorite professions to make gold with. Inscription at the beginning of the expansion is always a huge source of gold. From BFA to Legion and before, I have personally made millions of gold off of this profession. The new Dark Moon decks have been announced for Shadowlands, and for the last few expansions they have been relevant for most classes for a good portion of time. When something is in that high of demand, it usually means a good profit as well. On top of the Dark Moon decks, Inscriptionists will also be receiving a new optional reagent. Words of Power are optional reagents for increasing the armor class of crafted armor and are expected to be in very high demand. I don't foresee any way that you could go wrong with having an Inscriptionist come Shadowlands. Now since we have gotten the main professions out of the way, let's talk about your secondary professions such as cooking and fishing. I told you guys I would give you some tips later in the video, and here they are. These two professions are probably the two most overlooked professions when it comes to terms of making gold. At the start of BFA, I made it a point to make sure my cooking was leveled and I was able to craft the food that most players needed. This turned out to be an extremely good idea as the materials themselves were selling for an outrageous amount of gold. Not to mention the food was as well once the raids unlocked. With everyone worrying about their gear and gathering professions to flood the auction house, I was farming up all the fish and food materials I needed, and man was it worth it. I highly recommend you guys don't overlook the importance of these professions. They can be extremely boring to do, but they are most of the time AFK types things you are doing, so just turn on a show and be prepared to make a killing at the beginning of Shadowlands. From what we know so far about Shadowlands professions, Blizzard has really done an amazing job of bringing back a lot of these professions that have kind of fallen to the wayside over the years, as a lot of what made professions was stripped away. With WoW Classics having such a huge success and still continuing to see success, it seems Blizzard is returning to its roots and bringing back a lot of these throwbacks that players will learn to love again. Something else that we love is making gold. Based on all that information, I am going to rank what I think are going to be the best gold making professions to have come Shadowlands. Remember guys, these are just my personal opinion based on what I have historically seen and what we currently know about Shadowlands. Also, this is based off the beginning of the expansion, so some of these professions could shift over time depending on the material costs. With all that being said, I believe Inscriptionist will hold its crown as the top gold making method once Shadowlands launches. The reason behind this is because we know that Dark Moon decks are going to sell and be in very high demand since they are most likely going to be the best for most classes for a long time. The addition of Words of Power as the optional reagent I also think is going to be in very high demand and go for a ton of gold. This is also not including everything else that Inscription has to offer with glyphs, tomes, and Vantis runes. In combination with the changes coming in Shadowlands, I don't think you can go wrong with leveling an Inscriptionist first. A close, and I mean close second, is going to be Enchanting. You could really say these are both number one because I think it'd be very interesting to compare how much gold these two professions are going to make at the start. The changes that are coming in Shadowlands with them bringing back armor and chants only adds to how incredible enchanting has been over the years for gold makers. Not only are we keeping all the normal stuff that people have seen make a ton of gold over the years, but we are bringing back something that is known to have a good profitability off of it for an extended amount of time. The armor and chants are going to stay relevant because people are going to always be upgrading their gear and need the enchant to go with it. I am extremely excited for these changes and can't wait to print gold with enchanting. Third on the list is going to be Alchemy. This is way higher than usual as we compare it with the data on previous expansions, but I think with the changes coming in Shadowlands and the reintroduction of the oils is going to be a very good thing for Alchemy. Not only are you going to be able to still provide the flask and potions that are known to sell for a ridiculous amount at the start of raid progression, but you're going to be able to add another variable to it with the oils. I believe the oils are the variable that Alchemy needed in order to be a player at the start of the expansion. Fourth on the list is going to be cooking. A lot of players aren't going to focus on cooking, and it is the reason why I'm putting it so high on the list. Over the last few launches, this has been one of the most consistent ways I have made gold, and I don't see that changing come Shadowlands. If you also have fishing and skinning to combine with cooking, then you are going to make an insane amount of gold. For the rest of the professions, I believe they are all a toss-up to which one can be the most profitable, as I don't think choosing one or the other will have much of a difference in terms of gold making. If I had to guess, I would say leatherworking and blacksmithing would come next, followed by engineering, tailoring, and jewel crafting. The crafting professions always will do well at the first little bit of the expansion because players are working towards gearing their characters and buying the pieces they need, but this will have a time clock on how profitable it is after players already have the gear they need. I think with the addition of the sharpening stones and armor kits, this will propel leatherworking and blacksmithing above the rest. Engineering with the addition of the belt enchant is also an interesting one, as this will be needed by players when they get a new belt, but this is also only one item and won't need to be replaced all the time, so I think it will make some gold, but still not be as consistent as other professions. Tailoring didn't really get any additions to the kit from what we're used to seeing, and that is why I'm ranking it towards the bottom in terms of gold making potential. Jewel crafting is another that I am not sold on. The changes alone won't be enough to make it as profitable in comparison to others, but I do think it will be a decent amount of gold at the very beginning, and then we will start to see it fall off rather quickly. Well, there you have it, guys. This is what I think will be the best professions to make gold at the start of Shadowlands based off what we have seen in the past expansions. I hope you guys enjoyed, and don't forget to let me know what professions you plan on starting with in Shadowlands. Please drop a like if you enjoyed the video to show some love for the channel, and I'll catch you guys next time.